I used to think the worst thing you could do to someone was leave them. Now I know better. The worst thing is staying long enough to watch them slowly turn into someone you don't recognize, someone you're afraid to confront because the truth feels heavier than the lie. I never planned to read his messages. I never planned to fall in love with someone else either. But here I am, sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., holding a phone that isn't mine, reading words that weren't meant for my eyes, and realizing we've both been living double lives. What hurts most isn't the betrayal, it's how familiar it feels. Like I saw the storm coming and walked into it anyway. I don't know who I'm supposed to be now. The villain? The victim? Maybe both. And maybe neither. But I guess that's what this confession is for. I always believed relationships had a specific temperature, not a metaphorical one, an actual temperature. Some couples run warm, clingy, affectionate, constantly touching. Others run cool, independent, composed, respectful of space. Ethan and I, we were somewhere in the middle. Warm enough to feel close, cool enough to survive arguments without melting down. Or at least, that's what I used to tell myself whenever I felt something shift, some tiny degree of warmth or coldness that I couldn't measure but definitely felt. We met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's rooftop party, one of those pretentious gatherings where people pretend to be fascinated by skyline views because the conversations are too awkward to endure without a distraction. He was standing alone near the railing, holding a plastic cup like it was a shield. I remember thinking he looked like someone who felt everything too deeply but had never been given permission to say so out loud. I've always been drawn to quiet intensity, maybe because I never learned how to express my own. Our first conversation was simple. He said he liked the way I laughed. I told him I liked the way he looked at the city, like he was trying to memorize it. We exchanged numbers because that's what you do when something in your stomach tells you this person might matter. And he did. More than I expected. More than I wanted. The first year was good, like stupidly good. Waking up next to him felt like waking up inside a sunrise. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's how it was. He had this way of making the world feel softer. He listened. He remembered the small things. When I told him my mom used to braid my hair before school, he tried to learn how to do it from YouTube tutorials. He failed miserably, but the attempt meant everything. Then things started changing in ways I couldn't name. It wasn't sudden, it was more like erosion. Tiny pieces breaking off over time. At first I blamed work stress. Then I blamed routine. Then I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe I wasn't lovable in the same way I used to be. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday night. I remember because we always had our midweek reset, cheap takeout, and a mindless show. But that night he was distant, scrolling through his phone with a focus that felt too sharp for casual browsing. When I asked what he was reading, he flinched, not dramatically, just enough for me to register it. The kind of flinch you can't unsee once you've seen it. He said it was work emails. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the way he tilted his phone away from me felt intentional. And the way he locked it instantly when I stood to throw away our empty containers, that felt intentional too. Still, I said nothing. Silence was easier. Silence was safer. Silence gave me an excuse not to face the growing discomfort in my chest. A week later, I noticed he started showering with his phone on the bathroom counter, screen down. He used to leave it charging in the bedroom. I told myself I was overthinking. Everyone gets protective of their devices. It's normal, right? But my mind kept circling back to that flinch. And that's when I changed. I started watching him the way you watch a cracked glass, waiting to see if it's going to break or hold. His late replies, his sudden interest in working out, the way he smiled at his phone sometimes, a soft, private smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I hated that I noticed. I hated even more that I pretended not to. But the truth is, and I can say it now because this is a confession, I wasn't innocent either. Because around that same time, I met someone. No, I didn't cheat, not then. But emotional betrayals don't start with actions. They start with feelings you don't shut down fast enough. And I didn't. His name was Lucas. We worked in the same building, different departments. We bonded over coffee line complaints and elevator small talk. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't laughed in a long time. Not the polite laugh you give your partner to keep things smooth, but the real, stupid, unfiltered kind. It felt dangerous. It felt like oxygen. And it felt like a warning. The night I realized I was in trouble was when Lucas told me, "You look tired, like you're carrying something heavy." No one had said that to me in months, not even Ethan. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let the conversation continue, and continue, and continue. That's when it hit me. We weren't just drifting apart. We were drifting toward other people, and neither of us was stopping it. I wish I could say things between Ethan and me got better before they got worse, but that would be a lie. One of those comforting lies people tell themselves so they don't have to face the truth too quickly. What actually happened was quieter, subtler, almost polite in the way it unfolded. Two people drifting apart with the same gentleness we used to hold each other with. The transition from suspicion to certainty wasn't a moment. It was a slow accumulation of almosts, almost confessions, almost confrontations, almost apologies. It began with a morning like any other. Ethan was making coffee, humming under his breath, something he hadn't done in months. That should have been a good sign. Instead, I felt something cold settle in my stomach, because happiness that comes out of nowhere is rarely innocent. I watched him across the kitchen island, the sunlight catching the edges of his hair, making him look painfully familiar and painfully distant at the same time. "Sleep okay?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I lied. I hadn't slept well in weeks. He nodded, still focused on the machine, too focused. His phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up. He reached for it instinctively, too fast, turning the screen away in one smooth movement. I saw only a flash of the name, just a first letter, A. It could have been anyone, except no one texts him that early, and no one makes him smile that softly. He didn't notice that I noticed, or maybe he did and pretended he didn't. That's the thing about relationships near their breaking point. Everyone starts performing. I left for work feeling hollow, like I was carrying a secret I hadn't even discovered yet. Lucas noticed the moment I stepped into the elevator. "You okay?" he asked. There it was again, someone actually looking at me, seeing me. I wanted to say yes, but instead I let out a breath that felt too heavy to hold in. He didn't push, but his silence was warm, patient. That silence did more damage than any flirtation could have, because it made me feel safe. And when you feel safe with someone who isn't your partner, you're already in dangerous territory. We ended up talking longer than usual, walking to the cafe across the street instead of grabbing office coffee. I told myself it was harmless. People get coffee together all the time. But it wasn't the coffee that scared me. It was how natural it felt to be beside him, how easy it was to slip into conversation, how the tension in my chest loosened in his presence. He told me about the book he was reading. I told him about the dream I had last night, one I didn't even remember until he asked. The kind of small talk you only share with someone you trust, or someone you want to trust. When we parted ways, he touched my arm lightly. Just a brief, friendly touch, but I felt it all the way down to my ribs. That afternoon, the guilt hit me in waves. I sat at my desk replaying everything, Ethan's secretive smile, Lucas's gentle concern, and I realized I was standing in the doorway of a decision I didn't want to make. I could pull back. I could fix things at home. I could fight for what we had. But I didn't. Not then. Because part of me had already started letting go. That night, Ethan said he was going out for drinks with coworkers. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was tying his shoes, voice too casual for someone telling the truth. "Oh," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Anyone I know?" "Just the usual team." Another lie. I could hear it. I could have asked him the question echoing in my head, "Who's A?" But I didn't. Confrontation requires energy, and I was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. Instead, I nodded and watched him leave, feeling something inside me tighten and loosen at the same time, like something was breaking and freeing itself simultaneously. When the door clicked shut, my phone buzzed. "Lucas. Hope your day got better." Just 6 words. Simple. Harmless. Too kind. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Thanks. It did. A little. A little." That's how it starts. Always a little. Later that night, when Ethan came home smelling faintly of perfume I didn't own, I felt my throat close. I watched him kick off his shoes and avoid my eyes like it was the most natural thing in the world. "How were drinks?" I asked. "Fine," he said. "Long day. I'm exhausted." He wasn't looking at me, and I wasn't looking away. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be felt. We were lying to each other in real time, and the worst part was that we both knew it, but neither of us stopped. Neither of us demanded honesty. Neither of us walked toward each other. We were drifting, floating, choosing silence over truth. And in that silence, betrayal was already blooming, on both sides. Lucas sent another message before I went to bed. Ethan smiled at his phone in the dark. I turned away from him, my heart pounding with something dangerously close to anticipation. The cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were fractures. And soon, they were going to break. I used to believe cheating, real cheating, was a clear, definable line, a moment you could point to and say, "There, that's where it happened." But the truth is messier. Betrayal doesn't start with a kiss or a lie. It starts with smaller permissions, tiny allowances you give yourself that slowly expand until they swallow you whole. The day everything shifted between Lucas and me started with a storm. Not a dramatic one, no thunder, no violent winds, just a steady rain that blurred the city into soft, trembling shapes. The kind of weather that makes people feel lonelier than they want to admit. I arrived at work soaked from the shoulders down because the cheap umbrella I grabbed that morning had flipped inside out. When the elevator doors opened, Lucas was already inside, leaning against the back wall, hair slightly damp, sleeves pushed up, coffee in hand. He looked up, saw me, and let out a laugh that felt warm enough to thaw my entire morning. "Rough day already?" he asked. "You have no idea," I said, stepping in. Water dripped from my hair onto the floor, forming tiny circles at my feet. He reached into his bag without saying anything and pulled out a dry hand towel. "You're going to get sick," he said softly, handing it to me. It wasn't the gesture itself. It was the gentleness, the kind I hadn't felt in months, the kind that made something in my chest twist painfully. I took the towel. "Thank you." My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. The elevator was warm, too warm, and the silence between us wasn't like the silence between Ethan and me, cold, stretched thin, buzzing with things unsaid. This silence felt dangerous because it was comfortable, easy, natural. When we stepped out into the hallway, Lucas walked beside me, matching his pace to mine. People greeted him, he nodded back. He always seemed grounded in a way I wasn't. And maybe that was the pull. He felt steady in all the places my life felt unbalanced. Later that morning, he knocked on the frame of my office door. "You're still shivering," he said. "Come on, I'm stealing you for lunch." I should have said no. I should have drawn a line. But instead, I heard myself ask, "Where?" He smiled, slow, deliberate, warm. "You'll see." We ended up at a small cafe 2 blocks away, the kind with fogged windows and mismatched mugs. He ordered for both of us, remembering the exact sandwich I liked from a conversation we had weeks ago. Ethan used to remember things like that. Used to. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, books, the rain, childhood memories. And the more I talked, the more I felt parts of myself waking up. Parts that had been dormant, ignored, or dismissed at home. At one point, Lucas asked, "Are you happy?" My heart stuttered. The question wasn't invasive, it was sincere. And that sincerity felt sharper than any accusation. "I don't know," I said quietly. He nodded, as if he understood entirely. Maybe he did. He didn't push, he didn't pry. He just looked at me with this expression, soft but searching, like he was seeing something I was trying so desperately to hide. The walk back to the office was quiet. Not the comfortable kind this time. More like both of us felt the shift happening, but neither dared name it. When we reached the building, he held the door open for me, and for a brief second, his hand brushed my back. Just a touch, barely there, but I felt it everywhere. That evening, when I got home, Ethan was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. It used to be one of our rituals, cooking together, laughing, stealing bites off each other's plates. Now the kitchen felt like a crime scene, where the body was our relationship, and no one was calling for help. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Yeah, sorry. Lost track of time." "With Lucas?" The knife paused mid-slice. My heart jolted. Not because he said the name, he didn't know who Lucas truly was to me, but because of the tone. Not jealous, not angry, just cold, like he was stating the weather. "He's on my floor," I replied, trying to sound casual. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Ethan nodded once, the knife resuming its rhythmic tapping. "I see." 2 words, heavy enough to crack the air. I watched him for a moment, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight, and felt guilt rising like bile. Because I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say, "Nothing's happening, I swear." But it wasn't true anymore. Something was happening. Maybe not physically, not yet, but something was unfolding in the spaces neither of us was filling. After dinner, Ethan retreated to the bedroom with his phone. Familiar, predictable. Another night of distance. I stayed on the couch, scrolling aimlessly until my screen lit up. Lucas. "Made it home okay?" 3 words. Innocent, harmless, except not anymore. My heart beat too fast. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could still stop this. I could still choose Ethan. I could still step away from the edge. Instead, I typed, "Yeah, thank you again. Today meant more than you know." His reply came quickly, too quickly. It meant something to me, too. And just like that, we crossed the line. Not with our bodies, not with a kiss, but with the truth we didn't say out loud. We wanted each other. And wanting is the beginning of everything dangerous. Was the moment we drifted too close. Part 4 was the moment the universe stopped pretending it didn't notice. Because betrayals don't stay silent forever. They echo, they spill, they demand to be seen. The breaking point started with something stupidly mundane. I was looking for Ethan's spare charger because mine had frayed again. His was always in the bedside drawer, tangled with old receipts and the occasional forgotten movie ticket stub. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. I opened the drawer without thinking, expecting the usual clutter. But instead of that familiar mess, I found something new. A receipt, folded neatly, tucked under his watch. The kind of receipt you recognize immediately, even before reading it. A restaurant, a nice one. The kind you only go to on anniversaries or dates you don't want people to know about. My stomach knotted instantly. I unfolded the slip of paper with fingers that suddenly felt too cold. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, a dessert we never ordered together because he hated sweets. A reservation for 2. Late evening, 2 nights ago, on the night he claimed he was out with coworkers. And then I saw it. A name, handwritten at the bottom by the server. A. Not a full name, just an initial. But enough. The same initial that had lit up his phone. The same initial he smiled at in the dark. The same initial that made me feel like I was free-falling before I even understood why. I sank onto the edge of the bed, receipt trembling in my hands. For a moment, everything around me went strangely quiet. The hum of the ceiling fan, the noise from outside, even my own breathing, it all faded. Like my mind needed silence to process what it already knew. Ethan was cheating. Not maybe, not possibly, not suspiciously. Cheating. And the worst part? The very, very worst part? I wasn't surprised. Not really. A part of me had been waiting for confirmation. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how many minutes passed before I realized I was crying, quietly, the kind of crying you do when the hurt is too familiar to be dramatic. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Lucas. You free after work tomorrow? Wanted to show you something. I stared at the screen, torn between outrage at Ethan and guilt so sharp it made my ribs ache. Here I was, devastated by Ethan's betrayal, while actively building my own. But that's the thing about emotional cheating. You justify it in the shadows. You convince yourself it's different, that it's not as bad, that you're lonely, neglected, unloved, that you deserve connection, that it's not the same. Except now, it was exactly the same. We were mirrors of each other, hurting, lying, drifting. And that hurt more than the receipt. When Ethan came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the receipt placed neatly in front of me, like evidence, like a weapon, like a wound. He froze when he saw it. Then his face shifted, too fast, too smooth, into something between guilt and annoyance. Not fear, not regret, annoyance. Like I had inconvenienced him by discovering the truth. "Where did you find that?" he asked quietly. "In your drawer," I said. My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed. Not panicked, not desperate, just tired. "It's not what you think." Every person who says that means exactly what you think. "Then what is it?" I asked. He hesitated just a beat too long. "She's a coworker." My heart cracked, but I kept my voice steady. And? And nothing happened. We talked, we had dinner, I needed someone to talk to. And that someone wasn't me? It came out sharper than I intended. He looked away. That was the answer. He sat down across from me, elbows on the table, head in his hands. "I don't know how we got here," he murmured. I almost laughed. How we got here? As if we hadn't both been steering the ship in opposite directions. The room felt too small, too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. "You could have talked to me," I whispered. "About anything, about everything." He shook his head. "You weren't here." It was a knife disguised as honesty. "You checked out first," he added softly. I felt the words like a slap. Because maybe they were true. Maybe I had checked out first. Maybe the moment I let Lucas's smile linger in my mind, I'd already chosen a different path. But Ethan had walked it too, just in a different direction. with a different person. So what now? I asked. He didn't answer. Not immediately. He just sat there, silent, eyes glossy, mouth trembling with words he wouldn't say. And in that silence, I felt something collapse between us. Not with a bang, not with a scream, just a quiet, irreversible folding inward, a bridge giving way under too much weight. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed without touching me, without even brushing against me in the hallway, I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes were swollen, my cheeks blotchy, but what struck me most wasn't the sadness. It was the emptiness, the hollow space where anger should have been. My phone buzzed again. Lucas. If tomorrow doesn't work, it's okay. Just wanted to see you. And I broke. Not in grief, in relief. Lucas wanted to see me. Ethan wanted someone else. And I wanted something different from both of them. I wanted to feel wanted. I replied, "Tomorrow works." It was the simplest betrayal I'd ever committed. And the first one I didn't regret. Not yet. Was the point of no return. The moment where every choice became a slope instead of a step, where everything felt too easy to fall into and too hard to walk away from. The next day at work felt like walking through fog. I kept replaying Ethan's half-confession in my head, the soft guilt in his eyes, the way he said you weren't here, like he didn't realize he'd left first. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to hate him. But mostly, I felt numb, like someone had turned the volume down on all the wrong emotions. At noon, Lucas appeared at my doorway, leaning casually against the frame. "Still up for that thing I mentioned?" His voice was quiet, careful, like he sensed the thread I was hanging by. I nodded. Yeah, I could use the distraction. A shadow of worry crossed his face. "You okay?" "No." "Yes." "Maybe." I didn't know. "Rough night," I said instead. He didn't push. He never pushed. That was part of what made everything so dangerous. Lucas gave me space and attention at the same time. He offered something Ethan hadn't in months, room to breathe. "Come on," he said gently. We walked out into the city, the air warm but slightly overcast, the kind of weather that makes people feel honest without meaning to. Lucas led me to a small gallery tucked between a bakery and an antique shop. The glass front was fogged from the inside, faint classical music drifting through the door. "You said you used to love art," he explained. I blinked. I had told him that, weeks ago, in a conversation I barely remembered. But he remembered. He always remembered. Inside, the gallery was quiet. Paintings lined the walls, abstract shapes, blurred portraits, colors bleeding into each other like emotions with no boundaries. Lucas walked slowly beside me, hands in his pockets, shoulders brushing mine every now and then in a way that felt accidental but wasn't. "This one looks like how I feel," I said, stopping before a canvas of chaotic reds and muted whites. Lucas studied it. "Hurt," he said, "and trapped." I exhaled shakily. "Yeah." He glanced at me, not with pity, but with understanding. "You deserve more than feeling like that." "Do I?" "Yes." He said it without hesitation. "You do." I should have stepped away. Instead, I stepped closer. The air between us changed instantly, charged, warm, dangerous. Lucas's breath brushed my cheek as he leaned slightly closer to look at the painting, but his eyes weren't on the canvas. They were on me. I felt my pulse in places I didn't want to admit. My body leaned toward him before my mind could deny it. He didn't touch me, not yet, but his hand hovered near mine, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin, close enough that my fingers ached to close the gap. I pulled in a sharp breath. "Lucas, I don't know what I'm doing." He turned to me fully then, his voice low. You're hurting, and you're human. It was the simplest justification, and it was enough to crumble my resistance. We left the gallery in silence, not awkward, just heavy. We walked side by side, his arm brushing mine in rhythmic intervals, each one an unspoken invitation. When we reached the street corner near my building, he stopped. "Can I show you something else?" he asked. I swallowed hard, because I knew I should say no. I knew going any further would cross a line I couldn't uncross. "What is it?" I whispered. He hesitated, eyes searching mine. "Just somewhere quiet." My heart pounded. This was the edge. This was the moment. "I shouldn't," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "You don't have to," he replied softly. "But you also don't have to go back to whatever's hurting you." That sentence hit me like a punch. Suddenly, Ethan's face flashed in my mind. Tired, distant, guilty. His phone lighting up with A. The receipt, the lies. And then Lucas, gentle, present, warm, standing before me with eyes that asked but didn't demand. It wasn't fair. To Ethan, to Lucas, to myself. But fairness had stopped being part of the equation long ago. "Okay," I murmured. He exhaled, relieved but cautious, and led me to a small park 3 blocks away. It was quiet, tucked behind tall trees. We sat on a bench overlooking a fountain, water trickling softly. Lucas turned to me. "I'm not trying to take advantage of you," he said. I care about you, probably more than I should." My breath hitched. "I care about you too," I whispered, surprising myself with the honesty. He leaned in, not enough to kiss me, but enough for his forehead to rest gently against mine. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that felt more dangerous than a kiss. "I want to kiss you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But I won't, not unless you ask me to." My body went still. The power in that moment, the choice, was intoxicating. I didn't kiss him, not yet. But I didn't pull away either. And that was its own kind of betrayal. Not a mistake, not an accident, a choice. When we finally stood to leave, Lucas took my hand, not tightly, not possessively, but with a tenderness that made my knees weak. Our fingers fit together too naturally. We held hands all the way back to the office. We let go only when the elevator doors opened. But the imprint of his touch stayed on my skin long after. That night, Ethan asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I said I was tired. He nodded, not questioning it. He didn't touch me. I didn't touch him. We slept back to back. And as I stared at the wall in the dark, my heart hammered with a truth I could no longer ignore. I was already halfway gone, and the fall hadn't even begun. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming, that there was a sharp moment where everything pivoted and I could point to it later and say, "There, that's when I lost control." But the truth is uglier than that. It wasn't a fall, it was a slow, deliberate leaning. And by the time I realized how far I'd tilted, gravity had already chosen for me. I didn't plan to go to Lucas's apartment. I really didn't. I told myself I was only driving to clear my head, that the GPS rerouting me near his neighborhood was a coincidence, that parking outside his building was just me needing a minute to breathe. But every excuse was a thin, trembling thread, and I kept pulling until they all snapped. The night felt too quiet. My heartbeat felt too loud. And his text, "If you need someone to talk to, I'm awake," kept replaying like a whisper I'd already agreed to. I climbed the stairs, feeling like I was walking toward the edge of a cliff, knowing damn well I'd jump. When he opened the door, he didn't smile. Not that easy, playful one I'd grown used to. This one was softer, pulled down by worry, almost pleading. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know," I whispered back. But neither of us moved. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people pretending we still had a choice. His apartment was dim, except for the kitchen light behind him, casting a warm glow that made everything feel smaller, more intimate, like the world outside didn't exist. "Did something happen with Ethan?" he finally asked. I flinched. Even hearing my boyfriend's name felt like a strike to the ribs. "Not exactly," I said, stepping inside before he could tell me not to. "We're just off. I can't explain it without sounding ridiculous." "You never sound ridiculous to me," he said, closing the door. And that was it. One sentence. The softest little kindness, and it felt like the thread that held me together snapped clean in half. I tried to distract myself by commenting on the new painting on his wall, some abstract thing with sharp strokes and warm tones, but my voice cracked halfway through. My emotions kept pooling at the surface, impossible to hide. Lucas noticed. He always notices. He reached out, hesitating for just a second, then tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. A gesture so gentle it felt dangerous. His fingers lingered a heartbeat too long, and something inside me lurched. "Look at me," he murmured. I did. And everything unspoken from the past weeks, the jokes, the lingering touches, the emotional closeness we pretended was harmless, pressed in around us. "Tell me to stop," he breathed. I opened my mouth to say it, to remind him I had someone waiting at home, to remind myself I had someone who trusted me. But my throat closed. Instead, my voice came out in a tremble. I I don't want you to." His breath hitched. Mine did too. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to step away. The space between us narrowed, charged, electric, terrifying. My heart hammered like it was trying to break free from my chest. And when our lips finally met, it wasn't explosive like in movies. It was desperate, starved, months of tension collapsing into a single, trembling moment. My hands gripped his shirt. His fingers tangled in my hair. Every part of me screamed that this was wrong, unforgivable, irreversible. But God, it felt like relief. Like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. Like being seen in a way I hadn't allowed myself to crave. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. "Are you okay?" he whispered, thumb brushing my cheek. "No," I said honestly, "but I don't think I want to go back." He closed his eyes, forehead resting against mine. "This changes everything," he said. I know. And the worst part? I didn't care. Not in that moment. The betrayal wasn't an event, it was a choice. A quiet, terrifying choice that I made with my whole heart, pounding against someone else's hands. And once it happened, there was no pretending anymore. No going back to the person I was. I had crossed the line, and everything from here would only get messier. I woke up the next morning in Lucas's bed, the sheets tangled around my legs like evidence I couldn't hide from myself. For a few seconds, still heavy with sleep, I forgot everything. Forgot Ethan, forgot the guilt, forgot the weight of what I'd done. But then I shifted, felt the unfamiliar mattress beneath me, heard Lucas breathing softly beside me, and the realization hit like a tidal wave. I sat up too fast, my head spun, my chest tightened with that cold, sinking feeling you get when you know you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Lucas stirred. "Hey," he whispered, voice thick with sleep. "You okay?" The tenderness in his tone made the guilt burn hotter. I couldn't even answer, just nodded, eyes fixed on the floor like it was the only solid thing left in my world. He reached out slowly, the way someone would approach a wounded animal. "You don't have to run from this," he said gently. But I already was. Inside my head, everything was a sprint. Images of Ethan, the promises I'd broken, the lies I'd have to tell, the world I'd ruined with one night. Lucas seemed to read my panic. His expression tightened just slightly. "You're regretting it." "No," I said too quickly. It was honest, terrifyingly honest. "I'm regretting everything around it." He sighed, leaning back against the pillows. "You can regret the context without regretting me." I bit my lip. "It's not that simple." "Then tell me," he said softly. "Tell me what you're thinking." But how could I? How could I explain the hurricane in my chest, the way I wanted to stay wrapped in his warmth and, at the same time, wanted to run until my lungs gave out? Instead, I whispered, "I need to go home." The hurt flickered across his face, subtle but real. Right, of course. He didn't try to stop me. That somehow made it worse. I dressed in silence, the room too quiet, every movement feeling like betrayal layered on betrayal. When I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, there were 5 missed texts from Ethan. "Ethan, hey, are you okay? You didn't come home last night. You're scaring me. Please answer. Where are you?" My throat closed. Lucas glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. This was the beginning of the fallout, and we both knew it. Outside, the morning air felt too sharp, too honest. The drive home felt like punishment. Every streetlight catching the exhaustion on my face, every turn reminding me I was going somewhere I no longer fully belonged. I rehearsed lies in my head. None of them sounded convincing. None of them sounded like me. When I opened the door, Ethan was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, his eyes snapping up the second I stepped inside. The relief on his face was instant and devastating. "God, you're okay." He rushed up, pulling me into a hug so tight it made me stumble. The embrace felt wrong, not because of him, but because of me. I stiffened. He felt it. Slowly, he pulled back, his brows knitting together. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Not angry, not accusatory, just scared. And that broke something inside me. "I just needed space," I said, avoiding his eyes. "I was overwhelmed." He blanked. Overwhelmed by what? By my guilt, by Lucas, by the part of me that didn't want to be here. But I couldn't say any of that, so instead I muttered, "Everything." Ethan's shoulders dropped. "Okay, then talk to me. Let me help." The kindness in his voice felt like a slap. It was everything I used to love about him, everything I'd betrayed. And then, almost imperceptibly, his eyes narrowed as he studied my face more closely. "You smell like someone else." My stomach dropped. I swallowed, forcing steadiness into my voice. "What?" He stepped back, expression twisting with confusion and hurt. "Did you go to someone's house?" The silence that followed was horrible, thick, suffocating, undeniable. "Tell me you didn't," he whispered. I opened my mouth. No sound came out. His face crumpled. "That's a yes," he said, voice breaking. I felt myself drowning, guilt filling my lungs, shame tightening around my throat. I reached out instinctively, but he recoiled like my touch burned. "Who is he?" he demanded, not yelling, but shaking. I froze. Every answer was a landmine, every word a weapon. When I didn't respond, he let out a fractured laugh. "I can't believe this. I can't. God, I don't even know what hurts more, that you did it, or that you can't even look at me while you lie about it." "I'm not lying," I whispered. "Then say his name." My lips trembled. No name came out. He closed his eyes. A silent tear slipped down his cheek. And that was the first real consequence. The moment I saw the damage with no buffer, no excuse, no way to pretend the wound was superficial. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It was standing in front of me, and it had Ethan's face. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't slam doors or throw accusations or demand to see my phone. In some twisted, unbearable way, that made everything worse. His silence was heavy, an anchor tied to my rib cage, dragging both of us down in slow motion. He sank onto the couch like his knees suddenly gave out, hands covering his face. "I just need to understand what I did wrong," he whispered through trembling fingers. The question stabbed deeper than any shouting could have. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't blaming me. He was blaming himself for my choice, for my betrayal. And I couldn't breathe. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, voice cracking. He looked up, eyes red, brows drawn with disbelief. "Then why? Why would you? Why him?" I swallowed hard, wishing I could claw back time, wishing I could make both of us someone else. It wasn't about him. It was about me. I've been lost. "That's not an explanation," he whispered. Not angry, just broken. He was right. It wasn't. But I didn't have a better one. Just this gnawing truth inside me, that sometimes you drift so far from a person you love, you don't even notice until you're holding someone else's hand in the dark. "I can't talk about this right now," I finally said, hating myself as the words left my mouth. "I need time." "Time?" Ethan let out a shaky exhale. "I've been giving you time for weeks. You just didn't tell me there was someone filling the gaps." The shame hit like a punch. "I'm sorry," I said, and even to me it sounded hollow. He laughed softly, this wounded, disbelieving sound. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry I found out." I flinched, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. When I stepped outside to breathe, the world felt tilted. My phone buzzed, a message from Lucas. "Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Ethan's cracked voice still echoed in my head. Lucas's warmth still lingered on my skin. Two worlds, both of them mine, both of them tearing me apart. I typed back. I told him it didn't go well. His response was immediate. "Do you want me to come?" I closed my eyes. That was the moral line, the one I hadn't crossed yet, not fully. It was one thing to betray Ethan in a moment of weakness and emotional chaos. It was another thing entirely to turn Lucas into a replacement, into the next step in this mess. I typed, "No, please don't." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned. "I'm here if you need me, for anything." That anything carried weight I wasn't ready to face. Inside, I found Ethan pacing in the hallway like he didn't know where to put himself. He wiped his face quickly when he saw me. "Are you staying here tonight?" The question hit like a gut punch. It wasn't practical, it was emotional. It meant, "Are you still choosing us, even just enough to stay under the same roof?" "I don't know," I whispered. His expression crumpled. "I don't want to force you to stay. I don't ever want that. But please, just tell me if you're leaving because of him." I opened my mouth, closed it. I didn't know anymore. Was I running away from Ethan or running toward Lucas? The confusion twisted my stomach into knots. He stepped closer, cautiously, as if I might shatter. "I need you to tell me the truth. Do you want to work through this, or is this the beginning of the end?" Hearing it said aloud made my lungs seize. "I don't know," I whispered again. Ethan nodded slowly, like the final piece of him gave way. "Then maybe you shouldn't be here tonight." The words were soft. Not a push, just acceptance. A letting go that felt like it crushed both of us. I felt tears sting my eyes. "Are you kicking me out?" "No," he said. "I'm asking you to choose where you want to breathe right now." It was such a painfully fair question, and I didn't have an answer that wasn't cruel. I grabbed my keys with a shaking hand. Ethan sagged against the wall like he'd been hit. As I walked to the door, he said in a hoarse whisper, "Please, don't go to him." I froze. The truth was too heavy to hold. "I won't," I lied, because maybe if I said it out loud, I would believe it too. But when I reached my car, my hands were trembling, my breath shaking, my heart split between guilt and longing. My phone buzzed again. "Lucas, I'm still awake. Where are you?" The night pressed around me, thick and heavy, waiting for my next wrong move. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. The consequences weren't just beginning. They were accelerating, and I was still choosing the path that hurt the most. I sat in my car for a long time without turning the key. The street was dark, quiet, and cold, the kind of night that forces you to hear your own breathing, your own heartbeat, your own guilt. Lucas's message burned on my screen. Ethan's voice echoed in my head, and I felt suspended between two lives, two futures, two versions of myself. When I finally drove, it wasn't toward Lucas's place. Not at first. I drove with no direction, circling blocks, drifting through empty intersections like I was waiting for something. Clarity, courage, punishment, anything. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My chest felt too tight. I didn't cry. I didn't think I deserved that release. After nearly an hour, I ended up parked beside a grocery store that was long closed, the neon sign flickering above an empty lot. I let the engine idle and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. "This is your fault," I whispered to myself, and the truth of it settled deeper than the cold. For the first time since the night began, the question landed with clarity. Who am I choosing? Not just between two men, but between two versions of myself. One where I ran toward comfort and escape, and one where I finally faced the wreckage I'd created. My phone buzzed again. "Lucas, I'm worried about you. Please don't disappear." I exhaled shakily. Those words, that concern, it tugged at something tender inside me. He wasn't manipulating me. He cared. He had been there for me when I felt alone in my own relationship. But caring didn't make what we did right, and needing him didn't erase who I had hurt. I typed slowly. "I can't come over, not tonight. I need to fix what I broke." He replied almost immediately. "You don't owe him everything. He hurt you too, even if you don't want to admit it." My throat tightened, because part of me agreed. Part of me remembered all the little disconnections, the emotional distance, the feeling of being unseen. But another part, the part still capable of owning my actions, whispered, "He didn't deserve this." "I'm not choosing sides yet," I wrote, "but I can't use you to avoid facing him or myself." His reply took longer this time. "I'm scared this means I'm losing you." A pain I didn't expect tore through me. He was scared. Ethan was scared. And I was the reason both of them were hurting. I wiped my eyes. "Someone always loses," I muttered into the empty car. When I finally drove home, it was close to 3 a.m. The house was dark except for the hallway light. Ethan had left it on for me. The sight of it nearly broke me all over again. He wasn't in the living room anymore. I found him in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, elbows on his knees, like he hadn't moved an inch since I left. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were swollen, his voice was hoarse. "You came back." It wasn't relief, it wasn't accusation. It was something in between, fragile, unsure. "Yeah," I whispered. "I did." He swallowed painfully. "Did you go to him?" A pause, a breath, a decision. No. His shoulders sagged as if he'd been holding himself rigid for hours. "Thank you for being honest." I nodded, though the words felt heavy. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then moved aside to make space on the bed. I sat down, leaving a careful distance between us. The silence was thick and trembling. Finally, I said, "I need to tell you the truth. Not about what I did, you know that part, but about why." He braced himself. "I've been lonely," I said quietly, "even when we were together. I felt invisible, not unloved, just unseen." He closed his eyes like the words stung. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said. "I didn't tell you," I admitted, "and that's on me. I should have talked to you instead of—" My voice broke. "Instead of what I did." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. "It still doesn't justify it," he said, gently, not cruelly. "I know." We sat in silence. Then he asked the question we had both been avoiding. "Do you want to fix us, or do you want him?" My breath hitched. This was the moment, the real breaking point. Not the betrayal, not the confrontation, not the guilt. The choice. I looked down at my hands, wringing in my lap. My voice came out barely audible. "I don't know if I love him," I said, "but I don't know if I'm still the person who fits with you either." Ethan's eyes filled again, not with anger, but with grief. "Then what do we do?" he whispered. I took a long, shaking breath. "We stop pretending," I said. His jaw trembled. "Pretending what?" Then I whispered, "That everything is okay, that we're okay." The words hung in the room like the sound after a gunshot. Not a breakup, not a reconciliation, not a decision. A truth. Unavoidable, undeniable. Ethan nodded slowly, the defeat settling into his posture. "So, part of you already left." I didn't deny it, because he was right. I wasn't fully his anymore, and maybe I hadn't been for a while. The shift was quiet, not explosive, not dramatic, but it was the turning point, the moment everything tilted toward its ending. And for the first time all night, I felt clarity instead of chaos. This story wasn't going back to the beginning. It was moving toward an ending, one that would hurt no matter how gently we walked toward it. The morning light felt softer than it should have, too gentle for the kind of ending we were drifting toward. Ethan and I hadn't slept, not really. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, breathing quietly, thinking loudly. Every so often, one of us would shift, like we were about to speak, but then the silence would settle again, heavy, necessary. When the sun finally crept through the blinds, Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes like he was bracing himself for another kind of pain. "Do you want coffee?" he asked, voice hoarse. It was such a normal question for something that was anything but normal. "Sure," I whispered. He nodded and walked to the kitchen, leaving me sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket like it could shield me from reality. My phone was still on the nightstand, face down, mercifully silent. Lucas hadn't messaged since the last one. Maybe he sensed the shift. Maybe he was giving me the space I didn't know how to ask for. I took a deep breath and joined Ethan in the kitchen. He handed me a mug, hands shaking slightly. We stood there, facing each other over the counter, like two strangers who remembered how to love each other, but couldn't remember how to stay. "I've been thinking," Ethan said finally. My heart stuttered. "Yeah?" He exhaled shakily. "I don't want to hold you hostage in something that hurts both of us. I want us to be honest, even if it kills me." His eyes met mine with that old softness, but the sadness underneath it was impossible to ignore. "Do you want to stay with me because you love me, or because you feel guilty?" The truth sat in my throat like a stone. "Ethan," my voice cracked, "I love you. I always have. Something broke between us, and I didn't know how to tell you. And then I made it worse. I made it unforgivable." He swallowed, jaw working. "Do you want him?" "I don't know what I want with him," I said honestly, "but I know what I don't want." He tensed. "What's that?" "I don't want to keep hurting you." The silence settled like dust, soft, inevitable, everywhere. "So this is goodbye?" he said eventually. Not a question, a realization. "I think it has to be," I whispered. "Not because I don't care, but because staying would mean pretending we're okay, and we're not." He nodded, tears gathering but not falling. "I wish you'd said something before all of this." Me too. We both stood there in the quiet ache of everything unsaid. No screaming, no dramatic collapse. Just two people choosing the version of honesty they avoided for too long. He walked around the counter, stopping in front of me. "Can I hug you? One last time?" I nodded. He pulled me in, arms wrapping around me in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent of a life I was stepping out of. His breath hitched, but he held me tighter, like letting go too fast might break something irreparable. When we finally separated, his hands lingered on my arms. "I hope you find whatever it is you were missing," he said softly. "And I hope he deserves the part of you he gets." The kindness in those words nearly broke me again. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, meaning it in every possible way. "I know. But we'll be okay. Apart, but okay." And that was the first moment I believed it. I packed a small bag, only what I needed for a few days. Neither of us rushed. The quiet was gentler now, softened by acceptance instead of fear. As I stepped out of the house, Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes tired but calmer. "This doesn't erase everything we had," he said. "Just changes where we go next." I nodded. "Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye." I walked to my car feeling fragile, cracked open, but strangely lighter. Not because anything was resolved perfectly, but because the truth was finally out in the open, breathing, no longer rotting in silence. When I sat behind the wheel, my phone vibrated. One message. "Lucas, are you okay? No pressure. Just tell me you're safe." For the first time, I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something. I couldn't step into something new until I stood solidly on my own. So I typed, "I'm safe, but I need time, not to choose between you two, to choose myself." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, "I'll give you all the time you need. Just don't disappear on me." I smiled faintly. The ache still there, but softer now. "I won't," I whispered to no one. Then I started the car, not driving toward him, not driving backward, just driving forward. Toward whatever came next, toward healing, toward honesty. The story didn't end with a perfect reunion or a dramatic collapse. It ended with a quiet truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop choosing other people first and start choosing yourself.